G'day, welcome to Mark & Sam After Work. Today I've got a little tabletop review or talk about the 308 Winchester long range build that I did a shoot with last weekend, and we're going to use a little bit over the upcoming season. I suppose I start off with why I'm doing this, why I do a 308. I think the 308 Winchester is a great starter, but it's just a great round. It works really well. It's a really nice, good sort of power for what it actually is in the way of good mid-range cartridge, and yet can do a lot of what the Magnum stuff can do, and yet also works in the not too far above the rifle, or sorry, the handgun cartridges in the way of loaded down and what you can do with it. So it does a really good job in all sorts of things, from plinking to target shooting to hunting to, you know, even moving into the beginning of the ELR stuff is what it can do. So that's what I think about the 308, but I also sort of didn't, well, I do have one still in the cupboard. I've had a couple of 308s and they've both shot extreme long range for me. One of them is sort of dismembered in the fashion of a bit hard to use. It was a police special, so a Remington 700 with a 26-inch 1 in 10 twist barrel. Did a great job, shot it out to 3,000 yards in fact, and worked really well. But I wanted to go further with that action. I want to use that action somewhere other. So that barrel is still alive, hasn't got too many rounds to it, probably less than 1,000, still in good condition, but it's been taken out of that action and then the action has been trued. So I'd have to do work to get it back into that action. And that action set up behind a 708, so the 7mm 08 Remington, and working really nice at that. And I decided I wanted to leave it like that. So I then have my 1 in 12 twist in my old stainless steel Remington 700, which shoots really well, but it can't shoot the heavy projectiles. Can't really go past 170, maybe 180 gram projectile. So I was thinking about putting something together to do stuff with a 308 with a 1 in 10 twist, and I just so happen to have a barrel I've sort of been considering what I could do things with, and that is I got from the barrel manufacturer Sassen. I've forgotten now, someone can list below, or I'll link below where that machinery went and where some of the guys went. But Sassen, a UK barrel manufacturer that actually not long before they closed the doors, sent us some barrels to do some stuff with. We've got a 7mm which we've used and a 6.5 that we've used, and I'll put on links to what those rifles are. But really good barrels, but I had a 308 in a 30 cal barrel. Should explain a little bit of that. 30 cal barrel in a normal sort of varmint profile, not normally what we'd use, but still going to work really well and really suited what a 308 and sort of what normal people would look at one would be. So I decided put those two things together. We got a 28-inch barrel. I wrote incorrectly in the barrel 27, but it's actually a 28-inch barrel. It's just the match 308 chamber. It's 1 in 10 twist in a Sassen barrel in a varmint profile. So then in thinking about doing a 308 in that, what was I going to put it in? I could put it in that Remington 700, but I wanted to do a bit more of a precision budget build in the way of what would work really, really well, and yet is very, very affordable for anyone to do it. And that's really what I want to sit down and talk about what I've done here. What I used, as you would have seen in the video, was a HOWA 1500. So this is a HOWA 1500 action. This is one of I've had several here. We've used some, we've still got a couple, but this was a 6.5 Creedmoor barreled action. So pretty cheap to buy in that sort of form. We shot a little bit, did what it wanted to do, but we ended up with a couple of those, and I'll go through exactly what I've done. Like I said, it's a HOWA 1500 action. It's just got a different bolt knob on it, but other than that, HOWA 1500 factory trigger. I've lightened the trigger a little bit, got it down to just over 1 pound, just a little bit of work on the spring, but that's what I did there. Nothing complicated on that side of things whatsoever. The chassis, it's in the ORYX chassis, or the MDT do the ORYX chassis. And I've done a couple of mods to that, which I think are relevant for this sort of range. It does work a lot nicer as it's sitting here than it does in the factory form. And I can't tell you exactly what they've done factory form now, but I'll go through what I did. This is one of the original ORYX chassis. To start off with, the butt pad, I want to move that up. I always want to get that butt pad height so my collarbone can sit right up here without any problems to line up with that direct line of push, so I get that nice straightforward action of the rifle. It's one of the most important details. To do that, I simply unscrewed this, pulled it up to a different position, marked some new holes, tapped some new holes in there, bolted it back together. All done nice and simple on that format. Notice it's set up fairly short. It's a short length of pull, and that is because this rifle set up to as the 22-250 and as the 308. The SAM can use it. So 5 foot 1.5 inches can use it, and 6 foot 4 can use it. The way I make those two things work is basically I'll set up a shorter length of pull so that Sam with her shorter arms doesn't have to extend where it's hard to use the bolt. She's still in a comfortable place. And for me, I just can work in a little bit closer to me. That's not a fuss at all. What I do to make them different, rather than adjusting this, is by running the single scope base or the monoscope base, I can, as you can see, run it forward or back on there. In the middle of a shoot, yeah, you could change it. You probably would see half an MOA to 1 MOA of movement to move it front or back and relock it down, that sort of stuff. Not really how we do things. We'll tend to, if at the particular shoot, we'll work with what we've got. But you can see it's mounted a long way forward. That's because of my length of pull, and I want my eye relief. My head comes to a different place. I want my eye relief to be right. If Sam got onto this, she's going to struggle. She's only going to have a little dot to look through. We'd have to move it back to suit on that side of things. So that's the first modification to the chassis, is move that butt pad up. I should say, when I mention rail, this is a custom rail. This is a 50 MOA rail. I probably should have, if I'd done them when I got a few done at Mirage URL, I got my short action stuff, I got 50 MOA, and my long action stuff I got 60 MOA, which is what I was doing scope wise. I really find that makes it a little more flexible for using generally, but I do quite like using the 60 MOA rail. But by having the ERA-TAC on here, I can adjust from 0 to 10 to 20 to 30 right up to 70 to actually set it up with what I'm particularly doing on that shoot. And as you can see, sitting on is pretty much my original, nearly 15 years old, this Nightforce ATACR in the 5 to 25 by 56 second focal plane, right where they started. Really like the scope, and that's just simply the one I bashed on there, or I bolted on there, because nice and easy, and it just was nice comfort zone for me. The next modification on the stock was on the chassis was on this one. I think on the later ones they've got some mounting points. On the early chassis they didn't have anything underneath here to mount your bag rider to. I have my universal bag rider, and I simply drilled some holes in there and tapped them so that bolts on nice and neat and tidy. I think on the later ones you can just bolt them to them. But my universal bag rider is nice. This one is just the aluminium one. I have a steel one as well for extra weight in the way of absorbing even more recoil, but that went on there really nicely with the insert on it, so that stayed there since I bolted it on. So that's the back stuff, really obvious. Up the front here, the other obvious bit is my bipod system. Now this is my bipod system as a component A, which is the bit that have these long Atlas legs attached to it. I have my own feet on there, so they're nice solid feet that grip the bag nicely and work really well. There's no bounce or spring in them, that sort of stuff. My component D that bolts underneath the chassis here and bolts straight to the chassis. Just comes down here. No, it doesn't touch, as I keep on getting questions. It doesn't touch the barrel, it goes around the barrel. It ends up with a rifle with a really nice low center of gravity, or the bipod legs are up high. They fold away really nicely, so they go in the bag or the case and the safe all nicely like that. They work really well. I really like them, they work really well. This is the medium component D for people who want to do that. That suits the ORYX chassis, so that's designed to that. And there's various ways you could mount it in other fashions. The key to this is that it's not as simple as just that on this forend. What's inside here is I've got a piece of 6mm or 1/4 inch stainless steel flat bar that's mounted inside here. If you look in there, you see in there, there's some silver. That's because right as far as I can, I've ground it down to it fits that relief. There's a relief inside here, so stainless steel that's bolted from back here right the way forward. On this one I haven't. I can put on, there's a slight angle, but it can bolt to this same place here, like sort of a ATACR rail for doing that sort of stuff. I haven't got it on this one. I've got it on the long action in the ORYX. But that stainless steel bar that fills in there nicely and then is basically bolted to the chassis in 5 places along here, that actually gives a lot more stiffness to the front of this. Even though it is aluminium, it is still fairly lightweight, and it actually means that you get a little bit of flex on actually where you actually try and load, and when you're dealing with recoil and all that sort of stuff, there's a little bit of movement in there. And I found on the long action in the heavier recoils, it's probably struggles a little bit there. But by doing that extra bracing, actually when I put the 300 Win Mag in one of these chassis, I did the same on the bottom. I actually put some extra stiffness to the bottom, just to give more stiffness to the front end. The back of the chassis works really nicely. The front just giving it a little more stiffness. This one's simply got stainless in there, bolted in there, and that really, it adds a little bit of weight, which probably helps. It's not that much. I haven't weighed it, but it'll be up around the, I will have to put a weight on there. I would think it's around the 17 pounds, 15 to 17 pounds, but I'll have to put a weight on here. It's a little bit of weight, but it's more about stiffness. So that's the chassis, really straightforward, works really nicely, and good value for money in what it is. And like I said, those little bits and pieces turns into do a little work on it, makes it a bit more yours rather than just a retail purchase. Barrel wise, as I mentioned, that's the 28 inches is what we got out of this Sassen barrel. Probably I wasn't going to go any further, but really we just got what we could get out of it. Just took the ends off and got what we could get out of it. The going into the 30 inches and 32 inches and people do with 308s, listen, maybe there's a little bit into it. I don't really feel there's going to be much into it from what I've previously seen, but listen, it's still a good place in more of a standard sort of rifle. And lastly up the front is one of my muzzle brakes, just the 3-port muzzle brake. I did thread that. That's an 18 by 1 thread, so larger. I much prefer to be bigger than the 5/8 by 24, but that's an 18 by 1 millimeter thread, although the 5/8 by 24 would do just fine. And the muzzle brakes really work really nicely. I'll have to do some more videos on how they work. But they are really not trying to take all the recoil away. They're trying to make it the most pleasant to shoot, and they do a really good job. I'd have to say more and more so people get them realize that, but quite different design to most muzzle brakes, but work really well. And I suppose then you saw how it shot. It shot really nice. I was really happy with it. Nice flat action, the way it's actually dealing with recoil, that sort of stuff, and very comfortable to shoot. And those were the first 20 rounds you saw in that video. Oh, sorry. The last 10 of the first 20 rounds you saw in that video. I think we showed 10. I did do a basic run-in, break-in. Do you need to? No, you don't need to at all. There's no need to break in a barrel. I like to do a little tiny bit of it. So I clean the barrel, make sure it's clean. I run a shot and then I clean it again, just see what my carbon build up is. And then just do the same thing, do a couple of shots and then do a clean again and just see it and just see how that barrel's behaving, just as much for my memory on what the barrel behaved like. This behaved really well. So I went through basically that process. I'd run 10 rounds. Basically I'd run, what was it, 1 and then 2 and then 5 and cleaned on each of those intervals. A basic clean, not a real scrub, but a basic clean to get to, there's a mop coming through clean. And then I did a couple of shots on the chronograph, so I had an idea of my speed. I figured I was going to be in the, the 25-50 neck of the woods, probably maybe a little bit further, and we ended up with 2600, so very good feet per second. Very good muzzle velocity, I should say, for what it was. And this is what it was. This is the 200.02x. I forgot what the 02x is about. It's a reference to something that the guys at Berger did. In a Lapua case with the large primer, running 2208, which is Varmint. Varmint and 228 are not like the same powder, they are the same powder. They're both made by ADI in Australia, and it's sold under Hodgins as Varmint in America, but it's the same powder. There's probably, I could do other things running a heavier bullet, but I got to say I'm happy. It's working nicely. I've loaded the projectile out to sort of the happy place for it, so its bearing surface is covered by the neck, but no more. And we got in powder we're right on the edge of compression, so nothing too much. I don't share specific powder loads because everyone's looking at this, and that means that, okay, the majority of people may well be very, very confident with that side of things, but there is people who don't know what they're doing that they can go through and figure that out. I'm not going to give them a number. So that's just me being safe. That's one of the safe things I do. Be it popular or not, it is the way I do things. Other than that, the only thing I would say is that I didn't. The chamber is just factory. I probably could push it forward a little bit. I set it up for these rounds, which I'd set up before to run the police special out to 3,000 yards is where we ran it with a barrel, a different combination, but same rounds actually. And what you actually saw us shooting was the last 20 of the box of exactly that ammo. And that I just put them out to where they were running 20 thou off the lands, or I think it was 15 thou off the lands. On this match chamber, I had to push them back another 20 thou. Not really an issue. Probably ideally I'd push this throat forward, maybe even as much as 40 thou, and you could run them a little bit further. But I'm quite happy doing this in a match chamber. There's nothing going on, and that's how far they're set out. Yes, they won't run in the magazine. And next to it here, if you look at a comparison there, this is what will run in the magazine. This is what runs in my, which I use all the time in my 1 and 12 twist in the stainless Remington 700 throughout we run. That's the 175 grain, which worked really well. Shot it out to over 2,000 yards in the 175 grain Berger. In the long range boat tail, 175 grain Berger. And that will run in this magazine, and it will run fine in this rifle as well. So those have always been the two that I plan to run in this. If I use a magazine, I want to do a little bit of a magazine thing, then I go to the 175 grain. Still fine out to 2 kilometers if I really want to go there. But also fine for the plinking 600 yards and for other stuff we're doing at 1,000 yards. If I want to run a magazine, that'll go in there nicely. But as you'd notice, not only am I very practiced at single feeding, I quite like it. I'm not running my good brass through a magazine and scratching it backwards and forwards. I'm not having the tip go up the feed ramp to get into the chamber. I can put it in with my hand, nice and neat and tidy, and my hands will work nicely at that. I'm very, very comfortable single feeding. And the last bit I'd say on the magazine side of things is once you've run your magazine, then you stop and load your whole magazine. When I've run those same amount of rounds, I just put another one in and I can keep going to the end of the box of ammo without having to stop and load a magazine. The last bit I'd say on the ammo side of things, there's people who are saying, what's your load development? How's your load development? Those are amazing ESs. That's an amazing group, that sort of stuff from that video. I suppose, what's my main secret to this? I always say, and my story's not going to change because it is what it is I don't do any load development of any real level. I sit down and look at the ADI powder charts and read what I can interpret out of that side of things there and get an idea. I'll always set up, as I would have done with this 4 years ago with these rounds when I worked out that load, is I would go out with from the maximum I think it's going to run to, and then down to what I think it should run, and then a couple under that, I'll go up with those rounds. And whether that's, you know, basically 1 grain difference in between. In some of the bigger stuff, I'll do 2 grains difference in between, but 1 grain difference in between. And then I'll go out and simply shoot them. Generally, that's all I'm doing. I don't even chronograph them. Nowadays, it's a lot easier with the Garmin, with the Bullet Seeker, with the even with the other systems we've got there, some of the new ones. That Lab Radar, that's what I was trying to think of. Even with those, it's so easy to set up and get your speeds. I started to do that, but really all I'm after is pressure. Now I've got videos, I'll put on an image of what I'm looking at, and I'm simply looking at the back of the case and what the primer's telling me and what the back of the case is telling me. I'm seeing how much the primer's flattening out, seeing if I'm getting any stamping, any bolt stamping on the back of the case. I'm looking for that, and I'm feeling the bolt lift. What's actually bolt lifting like? What's its extracting like? All that sort of stuff. What it's pulling back? What's extraction like? All that side of things. And I'll go up to that point. Generally, on just a shot or a couple of shots to go up there, you're not going to feel much on your bolt. You might feel a little bit, but the back of the primer and the back of the case will tell you. I go through to make sure that I'm up there, but there's no negatives. There's no stamping, or a minimum of stamping. Some fresh brass will show you a little stamping, so you got to sort of interpret that. But the primer's not too sharp in its corner. There's no issues that I can see in any sort of level, and that tends to be or 1 grain down from that, depending what the round is. That's what I'm doing on that sort of front. The other detail I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure the powder I'm running is running full, just under or just on compressed. That's where I want to be. That's simple case volume, it's filled up, there's no room for air, everything is going to be as consistent as possible. I prefer to be a little bit compressed because it actually is even more making sure it's all there. I tend to run nowadays a little bit more jump. So these are running at, I've made sure that I'm running at 30 thou jump, 35 thou jump. I haven't measured it since I've shot it, so it might be as much as 40 thou jump now it's actually all settled in. That tends to seemingly help a little bit. The other thing that I'm definitely doing on these is the normal bits and pieces. So I unify the flash hole in the primer, I make sure I size all the brass, I go through and I use a VLD chamfer on there. I make sure that the bullets load very evenly. My fingertips tell me that they're not a heavy push in, they're going really nicely, but they're all very consistent. I use federal gold medal primers. I have, while I can, I always have, and I always will, while I can, as long as we can get them. And then, you know, it's Lapua brass and they're Berger bullets. They're good Berger bullets. That's it. So the only other thing I would say in my loading side of things is, in all honesty, is I simply don't fuss too much about it. I make sure that I got all the basics right as I go through. I use good product on that side of things. And probably the big advantage I have is I have such a great place to go and shoot. So we're shooting, you know, 600 and 1100 yards are short stuff for us, and that's where we start things off, as you see here. But it also moves into my strategy of doing things in the fashion of, if you've got your case fill good, you've got good neck tension, you've got good ammunition, you've got good brass and good projectiles and that sort of stuff, then if I'm not shooting well, okay, I very rarely would be looking at blaming a barrel. There may be, especially in a less set up rifle, there may be something in the rifle you're dealing with, that sort of stuff. There may be the conditions you're dealing with, but largely the shooter. What's the shooter doing wrong? You know, your parallaxes have got that right, is the scope doing the right things, that sort of stuff, but largely do the right job with good gear and it works really well. And I don't over fuss on, certainly chronograph speeds are just not something that I really focus on at all. I put them there so that I know how to dial in, I know the speeds and what they are. I put them there because I know viewers are interested in it, but for me it's not a place I focus on. We don't do 100-yard groups, and I suppose I get that people, when you've only got the range to go to, then you've got your 100-yard group and you've got your ES and your SD as to your chronograph side of things, and what else have you got? It's hard to analyze beyond that point. And that's probably my secret ingredient, is the shooting range and the amount of time I get to do on it. Trigger time's a monstrous thing. You form all those bits and pieces, you know, the gear using, you know, even down to the likes of our mat, our shooting mat. Everything stabilizes. I'm not fighting with anything, which builds confidence in everything. And I think that probably is the real thing you're looking at, as much as you look at an ES that is, or like the chronograph speeds, which, like I said, I rarely use. You look at those that are amazing, or the groups amazing, all that sort of stuff. I think it's just a general get together of things, of you set things up right, you do the basics in setting it up right. I think case fill's relevant, neck tension's relevant, good bullets are relevant, you know, butt pad, all those things are relevant. But once you get it all sort of lined up, then it really comes down to just doing the right thing, making sure you learned how to do your breathing, making sure you've learned how to do your trigger pull, making sure all those bits and pieces. Even a nice muzzle brake works, not so much as it's about the recoil, it's about the comfort. It's about when you pull the trigger, there's no shock going through, there's nothing going through it, so it's just comfortable and off they go, and they hit where they hit. And then once you get it all right, you see, that's what I see. Anyway, that's my story, and I suppose I'm sticking to it. I don't have any other good reasons to tell you why things work as well as they do, but they do work well, and this is a prime candidate for it. I'm looking forward to using it too. The 308, I think, is a great round. I think it's one of those rounds that, you know, it's not that old either, but it was done a fair while ago with a lot of brains to it. It does make a lot of sense in all sorts of ways. It is ammunition, it's all over the place. You don't need a hand load. There are good factory rounds to go with it, but there's also a lot of hunting rounds and all the rest of it. I think it's a good one, and I certainly wanted to get it back to where I had a good 308 that I had access to, and that's what we've got here. Very happy with it. The chassis, those bits and pieces, like I said, I think it's good value for money is what they do. The mods I like doing to them, I really like that, to be honest. I really like being able to tweak with something and make it mine, put some work into it, get some results out of it. And I do believe every one of the things you're looking at here, from the insert to the bits and pieces, has helped it and is part of what you're looking at in that group at 1100 yards. And this season we'll stretch it out and see where we go to. It's obviously, I've taken the 308 to 3000. Yeah, I suppose we'll have to go there again. Really, this is more designed for that 1,000 to a mile sort of stuff is really what I want to be able to play with this. But it's just also having like I said, access to a good 308, which I have sort of put together. Anyway guys, I'm sure there's lots of comments to go with that. Put all your questions and comments and things below. Thank you very much for checking in. I will catch you next time.